All right. Hello, hello. Another learning guide. And this one's with my special friend, Tina Powell at C-Suite Social Media. How are you, Tina?
Hi, I'm doing so great today. Thank you, Cheryl. How are you?
I'm talking to you, so my energy is super high.
Me
I
too.
love, and I'm going to warn everybody right now, there's a little bit of a love fest that happens between Cheryl and Tina. So you might see it. I just adore her and she knows it.
And the feeling is mutual, Cheryl. I have to tell you, it's really an awesome experience to be here. And I'm just so grateful, all the work that you're doing, Females in Finance. We're through the pandemic, but boy, you guys were really, you were my strength.
When in your mind, and I think that's part of it, right? Is that from a community base, one of the things that we all kind of picked up on was I really needed somebody to understand I am out here doing life sort of alone. Most of the advisors, I think, were feeling that for at least a good year. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would say, and one of the things that, I really felt that virtually having those relationships, but also to being able to reach out to people on Facebook. You have a really great Facebook close group as well too. I like sometimes even just being a fly on the wall and hearing what other people are struggling
Yeah.
with or the challenges. I always learn from that. And so it's, and this series too, I'm excited to be a part of it. I think we all lean into each other and we don't tap into each other enough.
Amen to that. And that's the
Yeah.
entire reason for the learning guides within the basic females in finance networking group. So, what we're going to do is Tina Powell is the guruess of podcasting. I think that one of the things that got me through pandemic was podcast, listening to them and hearing other people's struggles and how they were changing their business. And you did such a good job of going out and highlighting amazing human beings, a lot of women on what they were doing. And I was like, I didn't know. And some of these women I've known for a very long time. And then I'm like, I never knew that. And you just have a good way of pulling that dialogue out of them. So that's why I wanted you to come here today and talk about podcasting and the power of podcasting. So we're going to start, and these are always set up for 1, 2, 3 punches of questions so that you can decide whether or not podcasting is for you as the advisor watching this. I have, as a marketer, and Tina, I think you can agree with this, people will come and say, I'm going to start a podcast. And I'm like, you are? And then they get into it and they're like, this is work.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's hard. It's work. It takes a lot of time. And you
Yeah.
better be able to say like, hey, on the weekend, you're going to lose your weekends.
Yeah. You are going to, and it's going to be like that for a while until you get a process in a group. So
For
the very
sure.
first question up for Tina is going to be, why did you get involved with podcasting?
Sure. So the number one reason I got involved in podcasting was because for me, this was a passion project. I found myself having awesome conversations with women, especially at conferences. And I would say, wow, I didn't know that about you. That's so, so cool. And I also felt that there was a narrative that was missing from mainstream media and finance. And I came here as a second career. And I said, wow, if I would have known these things years ago in my 20s and my 30s, I would have been here. Unfortunately, and fortunately, I came to the industry after the age of 40. So the podcast was a way to get the stories and the narratives that needed to be told out in front for women, specifically mid and senior level career women, to be able to access that. Second is because I am a marketer. I am a digital marketer. I go back from the age of the, internet superhighway. And what I saw and always our experience with media is we won't recommend any strategy or any type of tool unless we've used it ourselves. And I said, wow, I combined the passion with the curiosity of learning the podcasting medium. And that's another reason why I got started with it, is saying, hey, if this has become part of mainstream media and how brands and people start to tell their stories, I need to know it from actually doing it. from studying and doing it. And so I'm a very hands-on person. And that's why I became involved in podcasting. And I didn't have, the other thing is this. I just said, if there's one person in the world that listens to that, and that's my mother, and this is like our way of kind of communicating and talking about life, then that's good. Then I've done good in the world.
You know, I have to tell you, the thing about the mom comment is that I was much of the same mindset when I started the F word, because I was like, I go out into the hallways of the conferences, right? And you're talking to somebody and you're learning like lots of the little pieces of stuff that you didn't even know. And when you do that, I thought, well, if the only people who listen to it are the people who are closest to me within financial services, whatever, so be it, because I think that this is really fascinating and I love telling people stories. I think that the other thing too that I find super fascinating is when you talk to people, really talk to them, not talk at them, talk with them, talk to them and hear and do intentional listening. You're pulling out information that, quite frankly, I can have known people for a very long time, never knew about them by just intentionally listening to their answers.
Yeah. And as a big result, and this has been one of the biggest things, the impact of the podcast, the biggest impact of the podcast is that the people listening, as well as the people being interviewed, are empowered in some way. There were women that we've had on the podcast that have been part of financial services for over 40 years. They've never been quoted. They've never been interviewed. They've never been asked to be on a podcast. And that really blew my mind. And then so it goes both sides. You know, I want a woman or man who's listening to the podcast say, you know what, today, actually, I was going to default to this type of behavior. I never do that. But actually today I'm going to do something different. And it was always to put a positive impact, to put some sort of positivity out in the universe. I feel so grateful to be in this industry, Cheryl. I feel so women need, Cecile Munoz said it the best, you know, women need to know something about money. And even if you don't know something about money, to have access to people who do, so that I can come to you and I could say, hey, Cheryl, I have a question about something. Like, now we're finally waking up. Women are waking up. We need to know this. God forbid that something happens to a couple of my friends who are now just starting again to get into podcasting. Provides that education that women can just listening. Then you know something. You're different than how you started that broadcast. You can listen for 40 minutes and just even for 4 minutes on some of them.
Right? Exactly.
You're different.
And that's perfect. It leads into the next question, which was, why would another financial service professional actually consider doing the podcasting? Because we started it off going, hey, you're about to give up some weekends. This is hard. Yeah. So go into this a little bit, if you don't mind.
Sure. So from a financial services perspective, I think the main reason why people do business with you is because of the same adage of people have to know, like, and trust you. And that is the same. That is never going away. That is universally how we make decisions, how we make buying decisions around who we do business with. So financial services professionals, if you have a podcast, is a way for people to understand who you are. Your core beliefs come out, things about just you personally, and it gives people a little bit of a taste of who you are before I send out that email, before I go to your website. So number one is to give people a sense of who you are and what you believe in. Number two is, through podcasting, you're going to be able to reach new audiences. And we put our stuff out there on blogs and on social media, but you have to meet the prospect or even your client or a family member, whoever, even a COI, where they are, not where you are. So you have to make sure that your content is accessible to them in the way that they want to engage with it. So that's number two, is building new audiences, finding new ways, finding new distribution patterns, right? And number three is, we hear this, and I'm sure, Cheryl, you hear this all the time. People want to stand out. They want to differentiate their brands. I'm a financial advisor. I compete with the entire universe of other financial professionals. How do you differentiate? The way that you differentiate is through podcasting. You tell the story of who you are, what you believe in, why you do what you do, and your personal story. And that is, I think there's no other marketing strategy, lead funnel.
Tactic.
You know what? Go out and tell the world who you are and what you do and why you do it. And that's a Simon Sinek principle, right? And he proved that with science and research. Yeah. Do that on a podcast. And if you don't want to have your own podcast right now, that's okay. Be a guest on somebody else's podcast. Be a guest on the F Word. Yeah. Ask for Cheryl, say, hey, or, even potentially in the suite, contact someone who's already doing it and say, hey, I want to dip into this. I'm not really sure. I'm not feeling great about it. I know it's something I want to do, but I'm not sure. I don't have enough confidence to get there.
Yeah. And, I tell people all the time, Tina, I know you've heard me say this before, especially within Females in Finance. That is, if you want to get thought leadership out, there's only two ways. You can write it and you can speak it. That's all you have. You've got to be good at one. You got to be great at one. And you got to be or hire someone to be really great at the other. I believe in my heart of hearts, one of the things I love the most about podcasting specifically is this, with specific to advisors that are watching, financial service professionals. If you were to have a podcast where you answer some of those most pressing questions that people ask, right? Every time you get off of the phone, if they only did one thing, maybe they have 12, podcasts that they created. And it's like, you know what? I just talked to you about a 401k rollover. I actually talked about this on our podcast and gave them the link so they can hear you in your thought leadership in your moment, and you can articulate the things that they need to be done. You sound professional. You sound like someone they can know, like, and trust. The marketing power behind that is it's exponential.
Absolutely. That's such a great thing, a great advantage that you bring up. The other is the use of devices. So a lot of our cars right now are integrated with our smartphone. The watches too. One of the things that having a podcast, you're able to get stats on where exactly how people are listening, and they can't listen to your website on a watch. And so if, again, it goes back to reaching people where they are and new technologies, and understand that how many people, right, are now back to listening with podcasts. We saw podcast listenership dip during the pandemic because people were home. They were no longer commuting, traveling. And now, again, we're back to commuting and traveling, right?
Yeah. And they're packed. We were just talking. I mean, I've been on, I started traveling again in March of 2021. And I love that first flight. It was like my private jet. Thank you, Southwest. You took me. And then I came back 3 months later and we can barely breathe because we're all squished back in the seat. So I was happy to see it because that means people are back doing, what they do best, which is it's a relationship business, right? And being out in front of people. I know that one of the things I want to make certain that you get time on too are what are the steps that another financial service professional could take to start their own podcast?
Sure. So that's a really great question. And yes, I have a podcast. One of the things that most people don't know is that podcast started 4 months before the first episode. And so here are the steps, financial services professionals, in the same way that I did it. So number one, I want you just to sit down with a sheet of paper or your computer and put down your why. Why do you want to start this podcast? Why you? Why now? Why this podcast? Why are people also too going to listen? Because we are in the attention economy here. And so people have, if they're listening to you, then that means that they're not doing something else. And not only that, what impact do you want to have? I was very, very specific about why I wanted to do the podcast. And it wasn't because I wanted X number of followers on Twitter, X number of downloads. If that's the reason why you're doing it, then turn the computer off right now and don't do it. So part of this is it's a very long tail. It's a long game. Wonderful, amazing things happen to you personally and professionally through the art of podcasting, as Cheryl will tell you. And it takes a long time. It's an evolutionary process. So number one is that you're going to sit down and you're going to write out your why to all of those questions. Why the podcast? Why you? Why now? What is it, the message that you want to bring? What is the impact you want to achieve? And not only that, what is it that you want people to feel? How do you want people to feel as a result of that podcast? Number two is that now you're going to start to ladder in to podcasting by being a listener, by being a fly on the wall. Listen to podcasts, not only in financial services, pick whatever genre that you want and start writing a list of what you like and what you don't like. I like this music. I don't like this podcast. They do too much selling and advertising it. I like a 15-minute. Start to kind of get ideas for your show and really be open about it. And just, again, a list on a piece of paper, fold it in half, what you like and what you don't like, and start to kind of come up with your own script. Be the producer of your own show in your mind. Don't run through, oh, I don't have enough money. Oh, I don't have the skills. Oh, I don't know the technology. No. Design it on paper as if all things were possible. That's what I want you to do. Okay. And then the third step I would say is reach out to people who are already doing it and see if you can't also be a guest on a podcast before you start a podcast. And there are plenty of people here, Cheryl, myself, the network in Females in Finance is over 3,000 strong. So you're not going to have a problem trying to find somebody to do that. And that's a really great way to start to dip your toe in the water. This is a slow integration. It is like learning to swim. It is hard. It takes time. Ladies, it's actually doable. It's definitely doable. But you need to kind of engineer it on paper and have it all fleshed out before you start to do it yourself. So hope that makes sense. Again, think of it, sketch it out on paper. Number two, make listens things that you like and you don't like. Number three, start to talk to people who are already doing it. Number four, get yourself on a podcast, feel what it's like to do that. And number five, you are going to need some sort of technology. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be lavish or lush. So you'll have to make some sort of investment. So the number five, I would say, set aside a budget of at least $500 to $1,000. Your technology on your computer, either you might need a better hard drive. You might need to update your computer, your operating system. So that's in a nutshell.
Love it. And, there's so many people within Females in Finance. You're right. One of the things we do, and it was one of the things that it was very important to me. The reason why we created our professional resources on our pro group was because we interview on our podcast every one of our pro members so they can have a piece of repurposeful content of their own. Because the other thing is that you can do all of this, and if you don't have a good marketing plan behind it, because people aren't just going to build it and you're going to come. This is no Kevin Costner movie. You have got to have a plan of how you're going to get that out there. I saw one advisor, Tina, who built an entire podcast around interviewing. This was a man. He interviewed all of his clients.
Wow.
Their business owner clients. And you know why? Because nobody ever comes to the local dry cleaner and asks why they did this, or nobody goes to the, and you know what's interesting is that they're so excited to have a piece of repurposable content that I was on this show and they're excited to talk about it. And guess what? You are the star of that show, even though you're probably doing the least amount of talking
Yes.
during. It's
Yes.
the best of both worlds.
Yeah, it is. And that's a hard skill also too to learn. Our tendency, if you're like me, you're Italian, you talk with your hands, you like to talk a lot, and learning to just read certain cues and let the story, let the person that you're interviewing understand also too what kind of podcast you want to have. There are plenty of people who do it well and they're the only sole voice. So you don't have to commit to say, okay, this is it. I'm going to make my rule is I have an interview style podcast and that's it. No. This is a format that can be very fluid.
Yeah.
You might start off interviewing if that's your best. Know thyself. And if you really rock it and want to sit there for 5 minutes and just, preach and put something out there, knowledge base, or ask a question. Cheryl, I love your idea. Perhaps that, as a financial professional, it is about asking the questions and say, well, today's question comes from, obviously it's the names of the person are protected, but here's a question that we received in the office this week and it deals with that. So it's a great vehicle to just, I think
absolutely.
It is transformational podcasting.
Absolutely. And I have to tell you, for those really sensitive, I have a really good friend. Her name's Mia Voss, and she has a podcast. I want you to imagine that's called Shit That People Don't Talk About. And it's funny, but you know what? She goes to the laundry list of all the things that nobody wants to talk about because it's sensitive. And so, and I can say that because this is my production. So if sorry if you don't like that, but that's the name of her podcast. And the point of it is that she got so tired of secretly searching on Google for things that she knew everybody was doing, and she's like, why are we doing this? You know what? And to give you an example, one of her episodes was about why is our bowel movement different colors? And she brought it in and she had they came in and talked about it. And you know what? People are like, her podcast went kazing because she did something nobody else was willing to do. So do not think that whatever you want to do is so crazy or nobody will do it. Chances are likely, if there's an entire Facebook community dedicated to people who are Crocs, there is a podcast in you that others definitely want to hear and participate in.
Yeah, tell your own story and be yourself.
That's it. Know thyself. I love it. So one of the things I want to be certain is you can reach out to Tina Powell at C-Suite Social Media. If you say you can't find Tina online, then you're not online, actually. You're living in a cave someplace because she is everywhere in a good way. But you can email her at team@csuitesocialmedia.com to chat further. That way she and her staff can all see it and get back to you quickly. But, this has been just amazing. I think also we're going to have a link for your newsletter so that people can learn more about the media work that you do. And you really do it from more of an educational teaching piece, which I love.
Yeah, we do. Look, we can't work with the world. We have a capacity right now.
What? I have advisors that come to me and say, everybody's my client. What's the answer, Tina? No, they're not.
We really want to see the females and finance community. We want to do good in the world in the same way that you're doing good in the world. So thank you so much for having us today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening. Again, just, be yourself. Put out positivity in the world through podcasting. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Be bold. Fight through that trepidation, and that's out. You can do this.
You got it. Thanks for doing this. You're the best.
Thank you.
All right.
You too, Cheryl.